The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the weathered general store, and Sophia Parker stepped down into the dusty street of Newton, Kansas, clutching a single envelope against her chest like it was the most precious thing in the world. The afternoon sun blazed overhead, turning the main street into a shimmering ribbon of heat and dirt. Sophia squinted against the glare, her dark traveling dress already covered in a fine layer of prairie dust. She'd come all the way from Philadelphia with nothing but the clothes on her back, a small carpet bag, and that letter. The letter that promised her a teaching position, a fresh start, a chance to leave behind the suffocating expectations of her former life. "Miss, you need help with anything else?" The driver called down, already unstrapping her single trunk from the back of the coach. "No, thank you," Sophia said, her voice steadier than she felt. She watched him heave her trunk onto the wooden sidewalk with a grunt. Around her, Newton bustled with late afternoon activity. Cowboys drove cattle down the side streets, their shouts mingling with the clang of the blacksmith's hammer. Women in bonnets hurried between shops, and somewhere a piano played an off-key melody. She pulled the letter from her bodice and read it again, though she'd memorized every word during the long journey west. It was from a Mrs. Adelaide Thornton, chairman of the Newton School Board, offering her the position of schoolteacher. The salary was modest but fair, room and board included in a small house behind the schoolhouse itself. It had seemed like a godsend when she'd received it 3 weeks ago, right after her father had announced his intention to marry her off to his business partner, a man of 60 with 2 grown children and wandering hands. Sophia had made her choice in that moment. She'd written her acceptance, packed what little she could carry, and left in the night with a note of apology she still wasn't sure her parents would ever forgive. "Can I help you, miss?" A woman's voice startled her from her thoughts. Sophia turned to find a pleasant-faced woman in her 50s, wearing a practical calico dress and a warm smile. "I'm looking for Mrs. Adelaide Thornton," Sophia said. "I'm Sophia Parker, the new schoolteacher." The woman's smile faltered just for a moment, but it was enough to send a chill down Sophia's spine despite the heat. "Oh dear," the woman said softly. "I'm Eleanor Gibson. I run the general store. You'd better come inside, Miss Parker, out of this sun." Sophia followed her into the dimly lit store, the sudden coolness a relief against her skin. Mrs. Gibson busied herself behind the counter, pouring water from a pitcher into a tin cup. "Drink this first," she said, handing it to Sophia. Sophia drank gratefully, the water slightly warm but wonderfully wet against her parched throat. "What is it?" she asked when she'd finished. "Is something wrong with the school?" Mrs. Gibson twisted her hands in her apron. "There's no easy way to say this, dear. Mrs. Thornton passed away 2 weeks ago." Heart gave out in her sleep. The cup nearly slipped from Sophia's fingers. "But I have her letter, the teaching position." I know, the school board has been in a terrible state about it. You see, Mrs. Thornton had written to several young ladies back east, but we didn't know which ones had accepted or when they might arrive. There was talk of sending telegrams, but no one could find her correspondence, and then Mrs. Gibson trailed off, looking genuinely distressed. "Then what?" Sophia asked, though she already knew the answer, sinking like a stone in her stomach. "The board met last week. They've decided to postpone hiring a new teacher until spring. The school will remain closed until then." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Sophia's feet. She gripped the edge of the counter. "I see. You have family you can return to, funds for passage back east." Sophia shook her head slowly. She'd spent nearly everything she had on the journey here. She had perhaps $10 to her name, and pride was all that kept her from crumpling right there in the general store. "I'll manage," she said quietly. Mrs. Gibson studied her with kind eyes that saw too much. There's a boarding house 2 streets over, Mrs. Patterson's place. She's reasonable with her rates, and if you need work, the Wildflower Saloon is always looking for serving girls. It's respectable," she added quickly. "No dancing or anything improper, just serving food and drinks." Sophia nodded numbly. "Thank you for your kindness." She retrieved her trunk and carpet bag and made her way to the boarding house, each step feeling heavier than the last. Mrs. Patterson was a thin, sharp-eyed woman who quoted her rates without preamble. $3 a week for a small room, meals extra. Sophia paid for 1 week, watching her precious funds dwindle to almost nothing. The room was barely large enough for a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small trunk. A single window looked out over the back alley. Sophia sat on the bed and finally let herself feel the full weight of what had happened. She was alone in a strange town, nearly penniless, with no position waiting for her and no way home even if she'd wanted to return. But she wouldn't cry. She'd made her choice and she'd find a way forward. The next morning, Sophia put on her best day dress, a simple blue cotton she'd carefully pressed the night before, and went to the Wildflower Saloon. The owner, a brassy woman named Molly Tucker, looked her up and down with sharp eyes. "You ever worked in a saloon before?" "No, madam." "You know how to carry plates and not drop them?" "Yes, madam." Molly sighed. "You're too refined for this place, girl. I can see it in the way you stand. But you've got an honest face and you need the work. $2 a week, plus you keep whatever tips the cowboys feel generous enough to leave. You work 6 days, noon to 8. No drinking, no sitting with the customers unless they're eating a meal, and if anyone gets too familiar with their hands, you come tell me immediately." "Understood. Understood. Thank you, Mrs. Tucker. It's just Molly. Start tomorrow." Sophia spent the rest of that day exploring Newton, trying to get her bearings in this flat, endless landscape so different from Philadelphia's crowded streets. The town was rougher than she'd imagined, built to service the cowboys who drove cattle up from Texas along the Kishome Trail. But there were families too, she noticed. Women tending gardens, children playing in the streets, signs of permanence amid the transient chaos of the cattle trade. She was walking past the land office when she overheard 2 men talking on the steps. "Warren Remington won't come into town himself anymore, not after what happened with the Harpers," one man said. "Can't blame him," the other replied. "But he can't hide out at that ranch forever. Man needs supplies, needs help. Word is he's let the place go half to ruin since his parents died." Shame. The Remington Ranch was one of the finest spreads in the county. Now it's just him and that old hand, Miguel, trying to keep thousands of acres running. Sophia filed the information away without knowing why. It was simply something to think about besides her own predicament. The next day, she reported to the Wildflower Saloon at noon sharp. Molly showed her where to find the aprons, how to take orders from the kitchen, and which tables were her responsibility. The work was harder than Sophia had anticipated. Her feet ached within hours, and her arms grew tired from carrying heavy trays. But she smiled at the customers, delivered food promptly, and tried not to flinch when the cowboys got loud and rowdy in the evenings. Days turned into a week, then 2. Sophia fell into a routine. Wake at dawn, eat a small breakfast at the boarding house, work at the saloon, return exhausted to her tiny room. She saved every penny she could, though she wasn't sure what she was saving for. Spring and another teaching position seemed impossibly far away. It was a Thursday afternoon, unusually quiet in the saloon, when the door opened and a man walked in who made everyone else in the room seem to pause. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of a summer storm. He wore dusty range clothes and moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin. But there was something guarded in his expression, a wariness that suggested he expected trouble. He took a seat at one of Sophia's tables, in the corner farthest from the door. Sophia approached with her pad and pencil. "Good afternoon. What can I get for you?" He looked up at her, and she saw surprise flicker across his face as if he hadn't expected to see someone like her here. "Coffee," he said, "and whatever meal Molly's serving today." "It's beef stew and cornbread." "That'll do." His voice was deep and rough, like he didn't use it often. Sophia wrote down the order and headed to the kitchen, aware of the whispers starting around the room. "That's Warren Remington," someone muttered. "First time he's been in town in 6 months." When Sophia brought his meal, he thanked her quietly and ate in silence, ignoring the stares from the other patrons. She refilled his coffee once without being asked, and he glanced up at her with something that might have been gratitude. He paid for his meal and left a generous tip, $2 whole that Sophia stared at in disbelief. That was her entire weekly wage. "Well, I'll be," Molly said, appearing at her elbow. "Warren Remington hasn't shown his face in town since the Harper trial last year." "What happened?" Sophia asked before she could stop herself. Molly settled against the bar, clearly ready to tell the tale. Warren's parents owned one of the biggest ranches around here. Good people, fair employers. But about 2 years ago they were killed in what everyone thought was a riding accident. Wagon overturned on the way back from Wichita. Warren inherited everything, but then things started going wrong. Cattle dying, fences cut, equipment destroyed. Warren suspected the Harpers, a family that borders his property to the east. They'd wanted to buy the Remington land for years. Sophia listened, captivated despite herself. Warren accused them. There was a trial, but there wasn't enough evidence. The judge dismissed the case, and the Harpers made sure everyone in town knew they'd been vindicated. Warren took it hard, stopped coming to town except when absolutely necessary. "That ranch is falling apart from what I hear. He can't keep up with it alone." "That's terrible," Sophia said softly. "That's the West," Molly replied with a shrug. "Hard land, hard lives." But Sophia couldn't stop thinking about the lone rancher, trying to hold onto his parents' legacy against impossible odds. She knew something about impossible odds now. Warren Remington returned to the Wildflower 3 days later. Again, he sat at Sophia's table, ordered the same meal, and ate in silence. But this time, when she refilled his coffee, he spoke. "You're new in town." It wasn't quite a question, but Sophia answered anyway. "Yes, sir. I arrived about 3 weeks ago. You don't seem like the saloon type." Sophia felt a flash of defensiveness. "I'm a hard worker, and honest work is nothing to be ashamed of." Something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Didn't mean offense, just an observation. "I was supposed to be the schoolteacher," she found herself saying. "But the woman who hired me died before I arrived and the position was eliminated. So here I am." Warren looked at her with those storm gray eyes, really looked at her, and Sophia felt something shift in her chest. "That's tough luck," he said finally. "I've had worse." This time he definitely smiled, though it faded quickly. "I believe you." He became a regular fixture after that, coming into town once or twice a week, always sitting at Sophia's table. They began to talk, brief conversations at first, growing gradually longer. He told her about the ranch, the struggles of keeping it running with only Miguel, his father's old foreman, to help him. She told him about Philadelphia, about teaching, about her love of books and learning. "You should see the ranch library," he said one day. "My mother loved to read. She had hundreds of books shipped from back east." "That sounds wonderful," Sophia said wistfully. She missed books terribly. There was no library in Newton and she couldn't afford to buy any. Warren studied her for a long moment. "Would you like to see it?" Sophia's heart skipped. "I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition if I'm offering. The ranch is about an hour's ride north of town. I could bring a wagon in on Sunday, your day off, if you'd like." She knew she should refuse. It wouldn't be proper, going out to a ranch alone with a man she barely knew. But something in his eyes, a loneliness that matched her own, made her say yes. Sunday dawned clear and bright. Sophia wore her best dress and tried not to feel like a fool as she waited outside the boarding house. But Warren arrived promptly at 9, driving a sturdy wagon pulled by 2 bay horses. He helped her up onto the seat with a gentle hand, and they set off north along the dusty road. The landscape opened up around them, endless rolling prairie dotted with cattle and bisected by creeks lined with cottonwood trees. Warren pointed out landmarks, telling her the names his parents had given to different sections of the property. His voice, usually so guarded, warmed when he spoke of them. "They came out here in '58, he said. "Bought the land when it was nothing but grass and built it all from scratch. My father always said this was the most beautiful place on earth." "It is beautiful," Sophia agreed and meant it. There was something about the vast openness, the endless sky, that made her feel both small and free at the same time. The ranch house appeared on the horizon, a sprawling structure of wood and stone that had clearly seen better days. The paint was peeling, shutters hung crooked, and the gardens that must have once surrounded it were overgrown with weeds. But Sophia could see what it had been, could imagine it in its glory. Warren helped her down from the wagon, and a weathered man with silver hair and kind brown eyes emerged from the barn. "Miguel, this is Miss Sophia Parker." "Miss Parker, Miguel Vargas, my foreman and the only reason this place hasn't collapsed completely." Miguel removed his hat and smiled warmly. "Welcome, señorita. It is good to see someone visit. This house has been too quiet for too long." Inside, the house was dusty but beautifully built, with high ceilings and wide windows that let in streams of golden light. Warren led her to the library, and Sophia gasped. An entire wall was lined with books, hundreds of them just as he'd said. Poetry, novels, histories, scientific texts, everything imaginable. "Oh," she breathed, moving toward them like they were old friends. She ran her fingers along the spines reverently. Warren watched her with an expression she couldn't quite name. "Take whatever you'd like." "They're just gathering dust here. I couldn't, please. My mother would have wanted them to be read." His voice caught slightly on the word mother, and Sophia's heart ached for him. She selected 3 books, holding them carefully. "Thank you. This is incredibly generous." He showed her the rest of the house, and she could see the work that needed doing everywhere. Broken furniture, torn curtains, rooms that had been closed off to save the effort of maintaining them. It broke her heart to see it. "I know it's falling apart," Warren said, catching her expression. "I do what I can, but there's only so many hours in a day, and the ranch work has to come first." "Have you thought about hiring help? With what money? Between the sabotage and the costs of the trial, I'm barely keeping my head above water." "I can pay Miguel barely, because he won't leave no matter how often I tell him he should find better work. But hiring anyone else is impossible right now." An idea was forming in Sophia's mind, wild and improbable. What if someone worked for room and board instead of wages, at least for a while? Warren looked at her sharply. "What are you suggesting?" Sophia took a breath. "I'm suggesting that you need help with this house, and I need a place to live that doesn't cost $3 a week. I can clean, cook, mend things. I'm a hard worker and I have nowhere else to go." "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." Warren ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling with the idea. "Miss Parker, Sophia, it wouldn't be proper. You, an unmarried woman living out here with me and Miguel. The town would never accept it. The town already looks down on me for working in a saloon, Sophia said quietly. At least here, I could do work I was raised for, keeping house, teaching maybe, if you'd let me use the books to continue my studies. And I'd be saving money, which I can't do in town. People would talk. Let them talk. I've spent my whole life worrying about what people thought was proper. Where did it get me? Alone in Kansas with nothing but a letter that promised something that doesn't exist anymore. She met his eyes steadily. I'm tired of being afraid, Warren. I'm tired of being helpless. Let me help you, and in doing so, help myself. He stared at her for a long moment, and she could see the war happening behind his eyes. Finally, he said, "One condition. You take the master bedroom, and I move to one of the smaller rooms upstairs. If you're going to be here, you need privacy and a door that locks." Hope surged in her chest. "You're saying yes." "I'm saying I must be crazy, but yes. We'll tell anyone who asks that you're the housekeeper, hired proper. Miguel can chaperone when he's here. And if you change your mind, if it's too hard or too lonely, I'll pay your passage back east myself." "Deal." Sophia held out her hand. "Deal." His hand was rough and calloused when it closed around hers, warm and strong. The touch sent an unexpected jolt through her, and from the way his eyes widened slightly, she thought he felt it too. Moving to the ranch took less than a day because Sophia had so little to move. She gave notice at the Wildflower and the boarding house, enduring Mrs. Patterson's tight-lipped disapproval and Molly's knowing look. "You be careful out there, girl," Molly said, but her tone was kind. "And if you need anything, you send word." "I will. Thank you for everything. That Warren Remington is a good man from what I remember. Hard times have made him harder, but there's good in him still. You might be just what that ranch needs." Sophia settled into the master bedroom, a large room with windows facing east to catch the morning sun. The bed was good, the furniture solid. She spent her first full day at the ranch cleaning that room until it shone, washing curtains and linens, polishing furniture. It felt good to work with her hands like this, purposeful. Warren was awkward around her at first, clearly unused to having anyone in the house. He spent most of his time outside with Miguel, working the cattle, mending fences, doing the endless tasks that kept a ranch running. But Sophia set about transforming the house. She started with the kitchen, scrubbing years of neglect from the floors and counters, organizing the pantry, learning to cook on the massive iron stove. Miguel was patient with her mistakes, teaching her how to make tortillas and beans, how to prepare the beef that was plentiful on a cattle ranch. Within a week, she had the main living areas clean and orderly. She mended curtains, beat dust from rugs, washed windows until they sparkled. The house began to feel like a home again instead of a mausoleum. Warren noticed. She could see it in the way he looked around when he came in for meals, surprise and something like gratitude in his eyes. "You didn't have to do all this," he said one evening over dinner. "I wanted to. Your mother built something beautiful here. It deserves to be cared for." His throat worked as he swallowed. "She would have liked you." They fell into a routine. Warren and Miguel worked the ranch. Sophia kept the house. In the evenings after dinner, she would sit in the library and read while Warren worked on his accounts at his father's old desk. Sometimes he would ask her what she was reading, and she would tell him about whatever novel or history she'd gotten lost in. Sometimes he would tell her stories about the ranch, about his parents, about the land he loved so much. Slowly, carefully, they became friends. One evening, about 3 weeks after she'd moved to the ranch, Sophia was making bread when Warren came in looking troubled. "What's wrong?" she asked, dusting flour from her hands. "Cattle went missing from the north section. 20 head, maybe more. Rustlers, likely. Or the Harpers trying to ruin me once and for all?" His voice was bitter. "I can't afford to lose 20 head. That's money we need to get through winter." "What are you going to do?" "Tomorrow, Miguel and I will track them, see if we can find where they went." "But if they've already been driven over the border into Colorado, they're as good as gone." Sophia saw the defeat in his shoulders, the weight of another blow to a man who'd already taken so many. Without thinking, she crossed the kitchen and put her hand on his arm. "You'll find them. And even if you don't, we'll manage somehow. You're not alone anymore, Warren." He looked down at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. Something shifted between them in that moment, the air seeming to thicken and warm. Warren lifted his own hand slowly, as if he might touch her face, but then Miguel's boots sounded on the porch and the moment shattered. Warren stepped back. "I should get cleaned up for dinner." He left the kitchen quickly, leaving Sophia standing there with her heart pounding, and the sudden, startling realization that she was developing feelings for Warren Remington that had nothing to do with gratitude or friendship. The next morning, Warren and Miguel left before dawn to track the missing cattle. Sophia spent the day trying to keep busy, but worry gnawed at her. What if they ran into trouble? What if the rustlers were dangerous? They returned at dusk, empty-handed and exhausted. "Trail went cold at the river," Warren said, his voice flat. "They're gone." Sophia served dinner in heavy silence. After Miguel had gone back to the bunkhouse, she found Warren sitting on the front porch, staring out at the darkening prairie. "May I sit?" she asked. He nodded, and she settled beside him on the steps. For a while they just sat there, listening to the crickets and the distant lowing of cattle. "I'm going to lose the ranch," Warren said finally, his voice low. "It's just a matter of time. Between the losses and the debts, I can't keep up. Maybe I should just sell to the Harpers and be done with it." "You don't mean that." "Don't I? What's the point of holding on if I'm just going to lose it anyway?" Sophia turned to face him. "The point is that this is your home, your parents' legacy, the land they built from nothing. You don't give that up just because it's hard." "I'm so tired, Sophia." The admission seemed to cost him. "I'm tired of fighting, tired of losing, tired of being alone." "But you're not alone," she said softly. "You have Miguel, you have me." Warren turned to look at her, and in the fading light his eyes were dark and vulnerable. "Why did you really come here? To the ranch, I mean. Was it just about saving money?" Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. "At first, maybe. But then I got to know you. I saw how hard you were fighting, how much you cared about this place. I wanted to help. I wanted to be part of something good again." "You are good, Sophia. The best thing that's happened to this place in a long time." They were sitting so close, their shoulders nearly touching. Sophia could feel the warmth radiating from him, could see the way his gaze dropped to her lips before returning to her eyes. "Warren," she whispered, not even sure what she was asking for. He stood abruptly. "I should turn in. Early start tomorrow." He was gone before she could respond, leaving her sitting alone in the gathering darkness, confused and aching. After that night, Warren seemed to withdraw from her. He was polite but distant, taking his meals quickly and spending even more time than usual out on the range. Sophia tried not to let it hurt, tried to tell herself that she'd imagined the moment between them, but the house felt colder with his absence. A week passed this way, tense and awkward. Then one afternoon, while Sophia was hanging laundry in the yard, a rider approached from the south. She didn't recognize him, and something about the way he sat his horse, confident and assessing, made her nervous. He dismounted at the fence line, a tall man with cold blue eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. "Afternoon, miss. This the Remington place?" "It is. Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Warren Remington. He around?" "He's out on the range. May I tell him who called?" "Charles Harper. I'll wait." He tied his horse and leaned against the fence, clearly settling in. Sophia felt a chill despite the warm day. The Harpers. The family Warren believed had destroyed his parents and was still trying to ruin him. She hung the last of the laundry with shaking hands, very aware of Charles Harper's eyes on her. "You're prettier than I expected for a housekeeper," he said conversationally. "I wasn't aware housekeepers had a standard appearance," he laughed. "Got some fire in you, I like that. Must get lonely out here, just you and Warren." "I have plenty to keep me occupied, thank you." "I bet you do." His tone made the words sound dirty. "Word in town is you're living out here with him, unmarried. Folks are talking. People always talk. I don't much care." "Maybe you should. Reputation's a fragile thing for a woman." Before Sophia could respond, she heard hoofbeats and turned to see Warren riding in hard, Miguel close behind. Warren's face was thunderous as he dismounted. "Get off my land, Harper." Charles straightened, his smile turning sharp. "Now, is that any way to greet a neighbor who comes calling with a business proposition? We have no business." "I think we do. See, I've been hearing things. Cattle going missing, money troubles, a ranch that's barely hanging on. My family is willing to make you a fair offer for your land, Remington. More than fair, considering its current state. I'm not selling. Don't be stubborn. You can't keep this place running, everyone knows it. Sell now while you can still get something for it. Otherwise, the bank will take it soon enough, and you'll get nothing." Warren's hands clenched into fists. "The only reason I'm struggling is because of what your family did. You killed my parents, you've sabotaged my ranch, and now you want me to just hand it over. Big accusations from a man who couldn't prove them in court." Charles's voice was ice. "Careful, Remington. Slander is a serious thing. Get off my land." For a moment, Sophia thought it might come to blows. The two men faced each other, tension crackling between them. Then Charles smiled again, that cold, empty smile. "I'll go. But think about my offer, and think about that pretty housekeeper of yours. Shame if her reputation got so damaged she couldn't find work anywhere in the county." His eyes flicked to Sophia. Awful hard for a woman alone in the West. He mounted his horse and rode off at a leisurely pace, as if he had all the time in the world. Warren stood rigid, watching until he disappeared over the rise. "Warren," Sophia started. "Not now." He stalked toward the barn, his entire body vibrating with anger. Miguel caught Sophia's eye and shook his head slightly. "Let him cool down, señorita. He will talk when he is ready." But Warren didn't come in for dinner. As darkness fell, Sophia grew worried. She found him in the barn, brushing down his horse with more force than necessary. "You'll hurt her if you keep that up," Sophia said quietly. Warren's hands stilled. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. Talk to me." He set down the brush and leaned against the stall, his shoulders slumping. "He's right, you know, about all of it. I can't keep this place running. I'm drowning in debt. And now you're here and people are talking, and I've ruined your reputation along with everything else." Sophia moved closer. "My reputation was already compromised the moment I started working at the Wildflower. I don't care what people say, Warren. I'm here because I choose to be. You shouldn't have to choose this. You should be teaching somewhere, making a real life for yourself, not stuck on a failing ranch with a man who can't even protect what's his. Stop it." Her voice was sharper than she intended. "Stop feeling sorry for yourself and listen to me. Yes, things are hard. Yes, you've had terrible luck and worse enemies, but you're still here, still fighting. That takes strength, not weakness." He looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw the pain in his eyes, the loneliness he tried so hard to hide. "I don't know how much longer I can fight." "Then let me fight with you." She took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "You don't have to do this alone anymore." Warren's breath caught. His other hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. Sophia, I can't ask you to tie yourself to a sinking ship. You're not asking, I'm offering. She leaned into his touch. Warren, I care about you, about this place. I want to help you save it. Why? The word was barely a whisper. Because somewhere along the way, this became my home too. And you became important to me. He searched her face for a long moment, then slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle and sweet, a question more than a demand. Sophia answered by rising on her toes and kissing him back, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest where she could feel his heart hammering. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Warren rested his forehead against hers. I'm falling in love with you, he said, the words raw and honest. I've been trying not to, trying to keep my distance, but I can't anymore. Joy flooded through her, bright and warm. Good, because I'm falling in love with you too. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Sophia felt like she was finally, truly home. They walked back to the house hand in hand, neither wanting to break the connection. Inside, Warren pulled her close again, just holding her, and Sophia rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. What do we do now? She asked. Now we figure out how to save this ranch together. He pulled back to look at her. But Sophia, I meant what I said about your reputation. If we're going to do this, if we're going to be together, we need to do it right. I want to marry you, properly, as soon as possible. Sophia's eyes widened. Warren, you don't have to marry me just to protect my reputation. That's not why. Well, not the only reason. He smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger, lighter. I want to marry you because I love you, because you're brave and kind and you make this house feel like a home again, because I can't imagine my life without you in it now. So, Sophia Parker, will you marry me? She wanted to say yes immediately, but she made herself pause, made herself be practical. Warren, are you sure? We've only known each other for a few months, and I come with nothing. No dowry, no connections, just myself. You're everything I need. He took both her hands in his. I know it's fast, I know it's unconventional, but everything about us has been unconventional from the start. And out here, time moves differently. When you know something is right, you don't wait. Sophia felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. Then yes, I'll marry you. Warren swept her into his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing. When he set her down, he kissed her again, and Sophia thought she'd never been happier in her entire life. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the Newton church. Miguel stood as Warren's witness, and Mrs. Gibson from the general store, who'd become friendly with Sophia, stood as hers. It was a small gathering, just a handful of townspeople who'd known Warren's parents and wanted to wish them well. Sophia wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Gibson had helped her alter from one of Warren's mother's old gowns. Warren wore his best suit, freshly pressed, and when he saw Sophia walking down the aisle, the look on his face made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. They spoke their vows in clear, steady voices, promising to love and honor each other through whatever trials lay ahead. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Warren kissed her tenderly, and Sophia felt a rightness settle into her bones. This was where she was meant to be. With this man on this land, building a life together. The wedding breakfast was held at the Wildflower, Molly's gift to them. She'd prepared a feast, and the townsfolk who'd come were generous with their congratulations and wedding gifts. Sophia was touched by their kindness, especially from those who'd made an effort to welcome her despite the unconventional circumstances of her arrival. But there were notable absences, too. The Harper family, unsurprisingly, and several other wealthy ranch owners who'd taken the Harpers' side during the trial. Sophia saw Warren notice it, saw the brief shadow that crossed his face, but he squeezed her hand and smiled at her, and the shadow passed. They rode back to the ranch in the afternoon, husband and wife now, and everything felt different and yet exactly the same. Miguel had tactfully made himself scarce, leaving a note that he'd be staying in town for the night to give them privacy. That night, in the master bedroom that was now truly theirs, Warren made love to his wife with tenderness and passion that left Sophia breathless and overwhelmed and completely loved. Afterward, lying in his arms in the darkness, she felt a peace she'd never known before. "I love you," she whispered against his chest. "I love you too." He kissed the top of her head. "We're going to make this work, Sophia. The ranch, our marriage, all of it, I promise you. I know we will, together." But promises, Sophia soon learned, were easier to make than to keep. The next few months were hard in ways she hadn't anticipated. Winter came early and harsh, bringing snow and bitter cold that made ranch work brutal. Several head of cattle died in a particularly bad storm, losses they could ill afford. Warren worked himself to exhaustion trying to keep up, and Sophia did everything she could to support him. But some days it felt like they were fighting a losing battle. Money was desperately tight. They ate simply, beef and beans and whatever Sophia could coax from the kitchen garden she'd planted. She mended their clothes until there was nothing left to mend, then mended them again. They burned through their supply of firewood faster than expected, and Warren spent his evenings chopping more until his hands were raw and blistered. Sophia helped where she could, taking over some of the barn chores, learning to milk the cows and feed the chickens, trying to ease Warren's burden. But she could see the toll it was taking on him, the worry lines deepening around his eyes, the way he sometimes stared at his father's account books with an expression of despair. One night in February, after a particularly difficult day when they'd found more fence destroyed and had to spend hours in the freezing cold repairing it, Warren sat at the desk with his head in his hands. "Warren," Sophia approached cautiously. "What is it?" He looked up at her, and she'd never seen him look so defeated. "The bank note is due next month. I don't have the money to pay it." Sophia's stomach dropped. "How much do you need?" $500. He laughed bitterly. "We barely have $50 to our name. Even if I sold every head of cattle we have left, it wouldn't be enough, not in time." She sat down across from him, her mind racing. "What happens if you can't pay? The bank forecloses. We lose everything." He reached across the desk to take her hand. "I'm so sorry, Sophia. I've failed you." "You haven't failed me." She gripped his hand tightly. "We still have a month. A lot can happen in a month. There has to be something we can do." But as the days passed, their situation seemed increasingly hopeless. They sold what they could, pawned Warren's father's pocket watch and his mother's jewelry, but it barely made a dent in what they owed. Warren tried to get an extension from the bank, but the manager, a cold man named Morrison who was friendly with the Harper family, refused. "Business is business, Mr. Remington. The note is due March 15th. If you can't pay, we'll have to take action." Warren came home from that meeting looking like he'd aged 10 years. Sophia held him that night while he finally broke down, allowing himself to grieve for everything he was about to lose. "We could go back east," she suggested quietly. "Start over somewhere new. And leave the ranch to the Harpers. Let them win." He shook his head. "I can't, Sophia, I just can't." She understood. This wasn't just about land or money. It was about justice, about honoring his parents' memory, about refusing to let the people who destroyed his family have the satisfaction of taking everything. 3 days before the bank note was due, Sophia was in town buying supplies with the last of their money when she overheard a conversation that stopped her cold. "Did you hear? The Harpers are planning to buy the Remington ranch at foreclosure. Got it all arranged with Morrison at the bank." "I knew it," They've been after that land for years. Shame what happened to Warren's parents. That family had terrible luck. Sophia stood frozen in the general store, her basket hanging from her arm. Terrible luck. Not luck. Murder and sabotage and corruption. And now the Harpers were going to get exactly what they wanted, unless she could stop them. An idea had been forming in the back of her mind, desperate and possibly foolish, but it was the only one she had. That night, after Warren had fallen into an exhausted sleep, Sophia sat down at the desk and wrote a letter. Then she wrote another, and another. 5 letters in total, sent to newspapers in Wichita, Topeka, and Kansas City. Letters telling the story of the Remington Ranch, of parents mysteriously killed, of sabotage and missing cattle and a corrupt trial. Letters asking for help, for justice, for someone to investigate what was happening in Newton, Kansas. She knew it was a long shot. Newspapers received hundreds of letters, and there was no guarantee anyone would care about one struggling ranch. But she had to try. She mailed the letters the next day without telling Warren. He had enough to worry about. March 15th dawned cold and gray. Warren, dressed in his best suit, the same one he'd married Sophia in, and prepared to go to town and face the bank. Sophia wanted to go with him, but he refused. "I need you to stay here," he said, holding her close. "I can't bear for you to see this. Warren, I'm your wife. I should be with you." "Please, Sophia, let me do this alone. I'll be back by evening and then we'll figure out what comes next together." She kissed him, trying not to cry. I love you too, more than anything." She watched him ride away, her heart breaking. Then she went back into the house and did the only thing she could think of. She prayed. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. Sophia tried to keep busy, but her mind kept imagining what was happening in town. Warren facing Morrison, unable to pay. The smug satisfaction on Charles Harper's face. The ranch slipping away, piece by piece. It was nearly 4 in the afternoon when she heard riders approaching. Multiple riders. Her heart leapt into her throat. Had Warren brought back the sheriff to evict them? She ran to the window and saw something she didn't expect. Warren was riding in front, but his face wasn't defeated. It was stunned, almost disbelieving. Behind him were 6 riders, well-dressed men she didn't recognize, and behind them a wagon carrying equipment she couldn't identify. She ran outside as Warren dismounted. "What's happening?" He grabbed her and swung her around, laughing. "You did it. I don't know how, but you did it." "Did what?" "Warren, I don't understand." One of the well-dressed men stepped forward. "Mrs. Remington, I'm James Crawford from the Kansas City Star. We received your letter, and it raised some very interesting questions. My colleagues and I have been investigating the Harper family and their business dealings. We've uncovered evidence of fraud, bribery, and conspiracy to commit murder." Sophia's legs nearly gave out. "What?" "Your letter about your husband's situation prompted us to dig deeper. We found records of payments from Robert Harper to the judge who presided over the trial, as well as testimony from witnesses who were intimidated into silence. We also found evidence linking the Harper family to the deaths of Mr. and Mrs. Remington." Another man stepped forward. "I'm Deputy Marshal Thomas Brennan. I've been authorized to arrest Robert, Charles, and Henry Harper on charges of murder, fraud, and corruption. They're already in custody." Warren was still holding Sophia, and she could feel him trembling. "I don't understand. How did this happen so fast?" Crawford smiled. "Your wife's letters reached us 2 weeks ago. We've been investigating quietly since then, gathering evidence. We wanted to have an airtight case before we moved. And today, when we learned the bank was about to foreclose on your property through a fraudulent scheme orchestrated by the Harpers, we knew we had to act." "The bank note," Sophia said. "What about the bank note?" "Morrison has been arrested as well for his role in the conspiracy." The foreclosure is void. Additionally, the Harper family's assets are being seized, and restitution will be made to those they've wronged, including you, Mr. Remington. It won't happen overnight, but you'll receive compensation for what they took from you." Warren's knees actually did buckle then. Sophia helped him sit on the porch steps, both of them in shock. "I can't believe this," Warren said hoarsely. "All this time I thought no one cared, that no one would believe me." Crawford knelt down to their level. "Justice doesn't always come quickly, but it does come. And you have your wife to thank. Her letters were detailed, passionate, and convincing. They made us pay attention when we might otherwise have overlooked this as just another range dispute." Sophia looked at Warren, tears streaming down her face. "I had to do something. I couldn't just let them take everything from you." Warren pulled her into his arms and kissed her, not caring that they had an audience. "You saved us," he whispered against her lips. "You saved everything." The men from the newspapers stayed for several days, interviewing Warren and Sophia, documenting the condition of the ranch and the evidence of sabotage. Miguel returned from town with stories of the arrests, how the Harper men had tried to flee but were caught at the county line. The trial, when it came 2 months later, was swift and decisive. The evidence was overwhelming. Robert Harper and his sons were convicted of murder and fraud and sentenced to lengthy prison terms. Morrison and the judge who'd taken their bribes were also convicted and sentenced. The compensation Warren received was substantial. Not only was the bank note forgiven, but he received payment for all the cattle that had been stolen or killed, for the damages to his property, and for the suffering his family had endured. It was more money than he'd seen in years, enough to not only save the ranch but to make it thrive again. The first thing Warren did was pay Miguel a proper wage and give him a bonus for his years of loyal service. The old foreman cried, insisting it was too much, but Warren wouldn't hear otherwise. "You stayed when you could have left. You believed in me when no one else did. Your family, Miguel." The second thing Warren did was hire a crew to repair the house and the outbuildings. Within weeks, the ranch was transformed. Fresh paint brightened the buildings, new fences went up, and the gardens were replanted. Sophia oversaw the renovation of the house, bringing it back to the glory it had known when Warren's parents were alive. She hired a young woman from town, Emma Sullivan, to help with the housework, a shy girl of 19 who'd lost her parents and needed work. Emma was grateful and hardworking and quickly became not just an employee but a friend. As spring turned to summer, the ranch flourished. Warren bought more cattle, rebuilt his herds, and began to make back everything he'd lost. But more than that, he was happy. Sophia could see it in the way he smiled now, easily and often. In the way he laughed, a sound she'd rarely heard when they first met. In the way he held her each night, grateful and loving. In July, Sophia realized she'd missed her monthly courses. Then August came and went with the same result. She waited another week, wanting to be sure, before telling Warren. She found him in the barn one evening, checking on a mare that was due to foal. "Warren, I have something to tell you." He looked up, immediately concerned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby." Warren's eyes went wide. "A baby? Are you sure?" "I'm sure. The doctor in town confirmed it this morning. He thinks it'll be born in March." Warren let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around before carefully setting her back down. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. Are you all right? Should you be out here in the barn? Shouldn't you be resting?" Sophia laughed at his sudden anxiety. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass. I'm perfectly fine." He cupped her face in his hands, looking at her with so much love it made her breath catch. "A baby, our baby." His voice was full of wonder. "I never thought I'd have this. A wife I love, a ranch that's thriving, and now a child. It's more than I ever dreamed of." "We both got more than we dreamed of," Sophia said softly. "I came here with nothing but a letter, expecting to be a schoolteacher. Instead, I found a home. I found love. I found everything I never knew I needed." Warren kissed her gently. "You gave me a reason to keep fighting when I was ready to give up. You saved my life in every way that matters." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Sophia continued to work around the house, though Warren and Emma conspired to keep her from doing anything too strenuous. Miguel carved a beautiful cradle from oak wood, his gnarled fingers working with surprising delicacy. As fall arrived and then winter, Sophia's belly grew round. She felt the baby kick and move, and would guide Warren's hand to feel it too. He was endlessly fascinated, talking to the baby about the ranch, about the horses, about all the things they would do together. "How do you know it'll be a boy?" Sophia teased. "I don't. Boy or girl, I'll love them just the same. But either way, they're going to learn to ride and rope and love this land the way I do. And read and write and think for themselves," Sophia added. "I'm still a teacher at heart, remember. Our child will be the best educated ranch hand in Kansas," Warren said with a grin. On a snowy night in late March, Sophia went into labor. The doctor was sent for, but the snow was heavy and the roads difficult. It was Emma who helped her through the early stages, keeping her calm and comfortable while Warren paced the hallway outside the bedroom like a caged animal. "She's going to be fine," Miguel said, trying to calm him. "Women have babies all the time. Not my wife, not my baby." But Miguel was right. Despite the snow delaying the doctor, everything progressed naturally. Just after midnight, with Emma and Warren at her side and the doctor finally arrived, Sophia gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Daniel Thomas Remington. Daniel for Warren's father and Thomas for the deputy marshal who'd helped bring the Harpers to justice. He had Warren's dark hair and Sophia's blue eyes, and from the moment Warren held him, Sophia knew she was watching a man fall completely in love. "He's perfect," Warren whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Sophia, he's absolutely perfect." "He is," she agreed, exhausted but happier than she'd ever been. "Our perfect boy." The seasons turned again, and little Daniel grew strong and healthy. He was a happy baby, quick to smile, and seemed to love being outside even as an infant. Warren would carry him around the ranch, pointing out everything, talking to him constantly even though Daniel was far too young to understand. Sophia watched her husband with their son and felt her heart might burst with love. This was what she'd traveled across the country for, though she hadn't known it at the time. Not just to teach in a schoolhouse, but to find her true home, her true family. When Daniel was 6 months old, Sophia discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news was met with joy but less surprise. Their family was growing and the ranch was prospering enough to support it. Their second child, a daughter they named Caroline Rose, was born in the spring of 1879. She had Sophia's lighter coloring and Warren's stubborn chin, and she screamed with impressive volume from the moment she entered the world. "She's going to keep us on our toes, this one," the doctor said with a laugh. He was right. Caroline was more demanding than Daniel had been, wanting attention constantly, but she was also affectionate and clever. As she grew, she followed her father around just like Daniel did, both children learning about ranch life from the time they could walk. Sophia did eventually get to teach, though not in the way she'd originally planned. She started a small school in Newton, teaching the ranch children and the children from town whose families couldn't afford to send them elsewhere. The school board, reconstituted after Morrison's conviction, was happy to pay her a small salary and provide a building. 3 days a week, Sophia would drive into town with whatever children wanted to learn, and she'd teach them reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and science. She loved it, loved watching young minds open to knowledge, loved being able to make a difference in the community. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. The ranch continued to thrive under Warren's management. He hired more hands as the operation grew, young cowboys who were treated fairly and paid well. Miguel eventually retired from active ranch work, but stayed on as an advisor and beloved grandfather figure to Daniel and Caroline. More children followed. A third son, James, born in 1881. Then twin girls, Margaret and Elizabeth, in 1883. The house that had once been so quiet and empty now rang with laughter and noise, with the sounds of children playing and learning and growing. Sophia sometimes thought about her parents in Philadelphia, wondered if they ever thought of her. She'd written to them after she married, telling them she was happy and settled. Her mother had written back, a stiff letter that was neither forgiving nor condemning, simply acknowledging that Sophia had made her choice. Her father never wrote at all, it hurt, but Sophia had made her peace with it. She had a family now who loved her, a husband who cherished her, children who adored her. She had a home and a purpose. She had everything that mattered. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Warren took Sophia on a ride out to the spot where they'd first known they were falling in love, the north pasture where they'd gone after the cattle had been stolen. It was a beautiful spring day, the prairie covered in wildflowers. He helped her down from her horse and they stood looking out over the land together. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Coming here, marrying me, everything that happened?" Sophia turned to look at him, this man she'd built a life with. There was gray in his dark hair now, lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun, but he was still the most handsome man she'd ever seen. More importantly, he was still the best man she'd ever known. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "This is where I was meant to be. With you, I see that now. That letter that brought me here, the one that promised a teaching job that didn't exist, maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was fate, bringing me exactly where I needed to go." Warren pulled her close. "I love you, Sophia Remington. More today than the day we married, and I'll love you more tomorrow than I do today. And I love you," she kissed him softly. "Thank you for giving me a reason to stay. You gave me a reason to keep fighting, to believe in better days. You saved me, Sophia. We saved each other." They stood there together, husband and wife, watching the sun set over the land they'd fought for and won. In the distance, they could see the ranch house, smoke rising from the chimney where Emma was no doubt preparing dinner. They could hear faintly the sound of their children playing in the yard. This was their legacy, Sophia thought. Not just the land or the cattle or the house, but the family they'd built together. The love they shared. The life they'd created from nothing but determination and hope. She'd arrived in Kansas with nothing but a letter and a dream of teaching. She'd found so much more than she'd ever imagined. She'd found home. She'd found love. She'd found herself, and it all started with a rancher who'd given her a reason to stay. The years continued to unfold like the pages of a beloved book. Daniel grew into a serious young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did, learning everything Warren could teach him about cattle and horses and the land. Caroline became a skilled rider, fearless and bold, often challenging her brothers to races across the prairie. James had a gentle nature and a way with animals that made him indispensable in the barn. The twins, Margaret and Elizabeth, were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and sharing everything. Sophia taught them all at home when they were young, making sure they could read and write and cipher before they were old enough to attend her school in town. She read to them from the library that had first drawn her to this house, the books that had belonged to Warren's mother. The children loved the stories, and Sophia loved sharing them. Warren expanded the ranch operations, buying adjacent properties as they became available. The Remington Ranch became one of the most prosperous in the region, known for quality cattle and fair dealings. Warren's reputation, once tarnished by the Harper accusations, was fully restored. He was elected to the town council, asked to mediate disputes, respected by everyone who knew him. But success never changed him. He remained the same man Sophia had fallen in love with, hardworking and honest, devoted to his family and his land. He still came in dusty and tired from a day's work, still kissed her like she was the most precious thing in his world, still held her at night and thanked God for bringing her into his life. When Daniel turned 18, Warren officially made him a partner in the ranch. Father and son worked side by side, planning for the future, discussing which pastures to rotate, which bulls to buy, how to improve their breeding program. Sophia watched them together and saw Warren's father in both of them, the legacy continuing. Caroline announced at 16 that she wanted to be a veterinarian, a shocking ambition for a young woman, but Sophia and Warren supported her dream. They sent her to Kansas City to study, proud of her determination even as they missed her terribly. She wrote home every week, long letters full of what she was learning, and came home every chance she got, bursting with knowledge and enthusiasm. James took over management of the horse breeding program, developing a reputation for training the finest cutting horses in Kansas. The twins, as they grew older, surprised everyone by showing a talent for business. They helped Warren with the accounts and contracts, their sharp minds catching details he sometimes missed. The ranch became truly a family operation, everyone contributing according to their talents and interests. Sophia continued to teach, not just in her school but at home, encouraging her children to think, to question, to dream big. On a warm summer evening in 1895, when the younger children were settled in bed and the older ones occupied with their own pursuits, Warren took Sophia's hand and led her out to the porch. They sat in the swing he'd hung there years ago, rocking gently, watching the stars come out. 20 years, Warren said softly. 20 years since you stepped off that stagecoach with nothing but a letter and a hope. Sophia leaned against his shoulder. Best 20 years of my life. Mine too. He was quiet for a moment, then said, I got a letter today, from your mother. Sophia sat up straight, shocked. My mother. She wrote to you. Warren pulled an envelope from his pocket. She's ill, Sophia, seriously ill. She's asking if she can see you before she dies. Sophia took the letter with trembling hands and read it in the fading light. Her mother's handwriting was shaky, the words careful. She spoke of regret, of years wasted in stubborn pride, of wanting to see her daughter one more time, to meet the grandchildren she'd never known. You want to go? Warren asked gently. Sophia thought about it, about the young woman she'd been when she'd fled Philadelphia, about the life she'd built since then. She thought about forgiveness and family and the shortness of life. Yes, she said finally. I want to go. I want her to see what I've made of my life. I want her to know I'm happy. They traveled to Philadelphia 2 weeks later, bringing Caroline, Daniel, and the twins with them. James stayed behind to help Miguel manage the ranch. The journey was faster than it had been 20 years ago, the railroad having expanded significantly. But it still took several days. Philadelphia seemed smaller than Sophia remembered, more cramped and dirty. The house where she'd grown up looked shabby, the neighborhood less grand than it had seemed in her youth. When they knocked on the door, it was opened by a nurse who led them upstairs to her mother's bedroom. Her mother had aged dramatically, her face lined and pale against the white pillows. But when she saw Sophia, her eyes filled with tears. "My daughter," she whispered. "My beautiful daughter." Sophia went to her bedside and Warren hung back with the children, giving them space. "Hello, Mother." "I was so wrong," her mother said, gripping Sophia's hand with surprising strength. "So stubborn and wrong. Your father died 5 years ago, never having forgiven you, but I should have. I should have years ago." "It's all right," Sophia said, tears streaming down her face. "I forgive you." They talked for hours, Sophia telling her mother about the ranch, about Warren and the children, about the life she'd built. Her mother listened with a mixture of sorrow and pride. "You were braver than I ever was," she said finally. "You chose happiness over duty. I wish I'd had your courage." Before they left, Sophia brought the children in to meet their grandmother. Her mother wept at the sight of them, these grandchildren she'd denied herself through pride. She held each of their hands, asking them questions, memorizing their faces. "Take care of your mother," she told Daniel. "She's a remarkable woman." "I know," Daniel said seriously. "Father tells us that all the time. She died 3 days later, peacefully in her sleep." Sophia stayed for the funeral, made arrangements for the house to be sold, and then took her family home to Kansas. She grieved for what might have been, for the years lost to stubbornness on both sides, but she was also grateful that there had been reconciliation at the end. The trip reminded Sophia of how far she'd come, how much she'd changed from that frightened young woman stepping off the stagecoach. She was confident now, sure of herself and her place in the world. She had a husband who loved her, children who made her proud, a community that respected her. She had everything she'd never dared to dream of. Life continued its steady rhythm. The children grew up one by one. Daniel married a rancher's daughter from the next county, a sensible young woman named Martha who loved the ranch as much as he did. They built a house on the far corner of the property and started their own family, giving Warren and Sophia their first grandchildren. Caroline finished her studies and returned to Newton, setting up the first veterinary practice in the county. She scandalized some of the older residents by wearing practical clothes and riding astride, but her skill with animals quickly won everyone over. She married late, at 30, to a fellow veterinarian she met at a conference, and they ran the practice together. James married his childhood sweetheart, the daughter of the town blacksmith, and they raised their family on the ranch, continuing the horse breeding program. The twins both married as well, one to a lawyer, the other to a banker, both men wise enough to recognize the intelligence and business acumen of the women they'd wed. Warren and Sophia watched their children build their own lives with pride and joy. The ranch house, once so empty and quiet, was now full whenever the whole family gathered, which was often. Grandchildren ran through the halls where Sophia had first walked 25 years ago. Laughter echoed from rooms that had once been silent. On their 30th anniversary, the whole family threw them a celebration. The house and barn were decorated, tables laden with food, music and dancing lasting into the night. Sophia danced with Warren under the stars, the same stars they'd watched together for 3 decades. "Happy?" Warren asked, holding her close. "Deliriously," Sophia answered. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible," he kissed her forehead. "You know what I think about sometimes? That day you arrived in Newton. What if I hadn't gone to the Wildflower that day? What if I'd never met you?" "But you did. We did. That's all that matters." "I suppose you're right, though I like to think fate would have brought us together somehow. Some things are just meant to be." Sophia smiled against his chest. "Then I'm glad fate sent me a letter about a job that didn't exist. It brought me to exactly where I needed to be." As they grew older, Warren and Sophia gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch. Daniel took over as primary manager, with his siblings helping in various capacities. Warren still rode out most days to check on things, unable to fully let go of the land he loved, but he also spent more time in the library, reading, or on the porch with Sophia, watching the world go by. They took to making visits to each of their children's homes, staying a week or two at a time, getting to know their growing number of grandchildren. Sophia loved these visits, loved seeing the different lives her children had built, but she was always glad to return home to the ranch. Miguel passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 87, surrounded by the family he'd helped raise. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, a spot he'd always loved. Warren delivered the eulogy, his voice breaking as he spoke of the man who'd been more than an employee, more than a friend, who'd been family. Time moved on as it always does. Warren's hair turned completely gray, then white. His movements slowed, but his mind stayed sharp. Sophia's dark hair gained threads of silver, then became more silver than dark, but her eyes remained as bright and intelligent as ever. They both developed the aches and pains of age, but they faced them together, just as they'd faced everything else. On a spring morning in 1910, Warren didn't wake up. He died in his sleep peacefully with Sophia beside him. She woke to find him gone, his hand still holding hers, a slight smile on his face as if he'd died happy. The grief was overwhelming, a physical pain in her chest. For 45 years, Warren had been her partner, her love, her best friend. The house felt impossibly empty without him, even filled with children and grandchildren who'd come for the funeral. They buried him next to his parents and Miguel, on the hill that overlooked the land he'd loved and fought for and built into something remarkable. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, a testament to the man he'd been, the lives he'd touched. Sophia stood at the grave afterward, when everyone else had gone back to the house, and spoke to him one last time. "Thank you," she said softly. "Thank you for seeing me that day in the wildflower. Thank you for giving me a chance, for giving me a home, for loving me. Thank you for every day we had together. I'll love you until the day I die, and then I'll find you again, wherever we go next." The wind rustled through the grass, warm and gentle, and Sophia chose to believe it was his answer. She lived another 15 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. She continued to teach until she was physically unable, passing her love of learning on to multiple generations. She wrote her memoirs, the story of a young woman who'd come to Kansas with nothing but a letter and found everything. She told the story of Warren, of his courage and kindness, of how he'd given her a reason to stay when she'd had every reason to leave. She told the story of their children, of the ranch, of building a life from nothing but love and determination. The memoirs were published and became popular, not just in Kansas but throughout the country. Young women wrote to her, inspired by her story, asking for advice. Sophia answered every letter, encouraging them to be brave, to follow their hearts, to build the lives they wanted rather than the lives expected of them. On a warm summer evening in 1925, Sophia sat on the porch in her rocking chair, surrounded by her family. Daniel was there with his wife and children and grandchildren. Caroline and her husband had made the trip from their home in Kansas City. James and his family lived on the ranch still, carrying on the horse breeding. The twins and their families had come from their homes in town. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and orange. Sophia watched it, thinking about all the sunsets she'd seen from this porch. Thousands of them, each one beautiful, each one a gift. She thought about the young woman she'd been, stepping off that stagecoach into an uncertain future. She thought about Warren, about falling in love, about the life they'd built together. She thought about her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, about the legacy they were creating. She'd arrived with nothing but a letter, but she was leaving behind so much more. A family that loved each other, a ranch that would continue for generations, a story of courage and love that would inspire others. As the sun slipped below the horizon, Sophia closed her eyes for the last time. She died as Warren had, peacefully, with a smile on her face, surrounded by love. They buried her next to Warren, their graves side by side for eternity, just as they'd spent their lives. The headstone reads simply, Sophia Parker Remington, beloved wife, mother, and teacher. She arrived with nothing but a letter. She left behind everything that matters. The ranch continued, passed down through Daniel and his children, carefully tended and loved as Warren and Sophia would have wanted. The house remained in the family, its library still full of books, its halls still echoing with laughter and life. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind blows just right across the prairie, people swear they can see two figures standing on the hill by the graves, looking out over the land they loved, together for all time. The story of Sophia and Warren became legend in Newton and the surrounding counties, a tale of love and courage passed down through generations. It reminded people that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. That home isn't always where you start, but where you choose to be, and that love can transform everything. Their great-great-grandchildren still work the ranch today, carrying on the tradition started over a century and a half ago. They know the story of how it all began, with a young woman stepping off a stagecoach and a lonely rancher who gave her a reason to stay. And they remember that sometimes the most important journeys begin with nothing but hope and a willingness to take a chance on something new, on someone new, on a future you never imagined but always needed. That is the true legacy of Sophia and Warren Remington, a legacy that continues in every sunset over the prairie, in every child who learns to read, in every couple who chooses love over safety, adventure over comfort, hope over fear. Their story ended, but the love they built, the family they created, the life they chose, that goes on forever.